The preparations were being finalized for the start of the much-anticipated summer party of the fashion company Vita Bella. Known for its luxurious events, this year's party promised to be even more special. An elegant fashion show featuring new collections from a brand that captured the hearts of the rich and powerful. In the midst of all this glamour and sophistication, there was someone who seemed out of place. Clara, a young black woman with a simple appearance, who had started her new job as a cleaning lady for the company just 2 days ago. Since her arrival, Clara had become invisible to most. Many ignored her completely, while others made a point to notice one thing: her weight. Their comments, often whispered, were filled with prejudice. Why did they hire her? She doesn't fit the company's aesthetic, one employee murmured to another. Clara heard it, but remained silent. Discreetly, Clara adjusted the final details backstage, cleaning the already spotless floor and straightening chairs that no one would probably notice were misaligned. Her uniform was simple, a white blouse and black pants, which contrasted sharply with the glamorous dresses and expensive suits worn by others in the room. She worked calmly, her movements precise, showing her attention to detail. But despite her care, people treated her like furniture. Their gazes passed right through her, as though she were invisible. One of the event organizers, Patricia, entered the backstage area and scoffed when she saw Clara. "You're still here? If you have something to do, finish it quickly and disappear before the guests arrive. We don't want to cause embarrassment." Clara just nodded, keeping her eyes down. Inside, she felt the familiar knot tightening in her chest every time she was treated this way. But she swallowed the feeling, as she had done so many times before. Despite it all, there was something in her eyes that seemed to hold a secret. Soft background music began to play as the first guests arrived. Men in tailored suits and women in dresses that looked as though they came straight off the runway paraded through the hall, decorated with delicate flowers and golden curtains. Vita Bella's summer party was an event to remember, but Clara didn't feel like part of that scene. She was still there because her supervisor had insisted on a final inspection of the venue. Even though her tasks were finished, Clara lingered with a cleaning cloth in hand, adjusting minor details, always staying out of sight. But it was no use. The weight of judgment was impossible to avoid. As she crossed the hall to fetch something from the storage room, the whispers began. "Who is she?" asked a tall model, adjusting the neckline of her dress. "Don't tell me they hire just anyone to work here now. She must be the cleaning lady." "Look at her," replied another, laughing. "She should be ashamed to show up at an event like this." Clara pretended not to hear, but her hands clenched the cleaning cloth tightly. She wanted to disappear at that moment. Her face burned, not with anger, but with something far more painful: humiliation. A waiter passing by with a tray didn't hold back either. "Hey, be careful not to bump into anything. These dresses cost more than you make in a year." More muffled laughter followed. Clara kept walking. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she knew she had to stay strong. She wouldn't say anything. Not yet. The party was now in full swing. The hall was filled with lights and laughter. The hosts alternated between short speeches and praises for Vita Bella's new collections, while guests enjoyed champagne and sophisticated appetizers. Clara had finished her shift and was about to leave when Patricia, the event organizer, called her. "You!" Patricia pointed from afar, her tone curt and authoritative. "Come here for a moment?" Clara hesitated but obeyed. She approached as Patricia looked her up and down, visibly displeased with her presence. "Take these to the storage room," she said, pointing at a pile of empty boxes. "You shouldn't even be here, but since you are, do something useful." Clara picked up the boxes in silence. But her entrance into the main hall, where everyone could see her, did not go unnoticed. The boxes obstructed her view, and at one point, she slightly bumped into one of the tables decorated with floral arrangements. A vase tipped over, spilling a bit of water. The room froze. "Oh my God!" shouted Patricia, with theatrical exaggeration. "What are you doing? Do you have any idea how much that costs?" All eyes turned to Clara. She tried to apologize, but before she could say anything, one of the managers, Fernando, stepped in with sarcasm. "I think we should have warned her that the cleaning uniform doesn't include ruining the party decorations." Laughter erupted in the room. Some whispered, others laughed openly. Clara's eyes welled with tears, but she stayed firm. With trembling hands, she put the vase back in place and lowered her head, trying to leave quickly. But Patricia wouldn't let it go. No, wait. Since you're here, you might as well clean the floor. We wouldn't want anyone to slip, right? Patricia held a microphone as she made the comment, amplifying Clara's humiliation. More laughter followed. That's not necessary, Clara tried to say, her voice calm and low, but Patricia insisted. Of course it is. It's your job, isn't it? Clara took a deep breath. She looked around. Every face seemed to enjoy her embarrassment, but she didn't respond. She bent down, grabbed a cloth she carried with her, and began cleaning as laughter echoed around her. When she finished, Clara stood up slowly. Her eyes, though calm, held something new, a determination no one seemed to notice. She turned to Patricia and spoke, for the first time, in a firmer tone. I'm done. Can I leave now? Patricia shook her head, satisfied with what seemed to be her victory. But she had no idea the night was far from over. Clara left the cleaning cloth in a corner, breathing deeply as she tried to control the avalanche of emotions threatening to spill over. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry in front of everyone. She wanted to leave, to disappear into the company's hallways, but the attention she had drawn followed her like a shadow. As she passed near the buffet, she overheard two high-ranking employees, Luciana and Rebecca, whispering openly without trying to hide it. Did you see that? She looked so lost, like she's never seen a fancy event in her life. Probably because she hasn't. She's probably used to cleaning much simpler places, Rebecca replied, laughing. And look at her size. I bet half the food will disappear if she gets near the buffet. Luciana chuckled, shaking her head. The company should have better standards, even for hiring cleaning staff. We're representing fashion, not a circus. The words cut through Clara like knives. She paused for a moment, but pretended not to hear. She kept walking toward the exit, her steps growing faster. Before she could leave the hall, Clara was stopped by the company's creative director, Enrique, an elegant and authoritative man known for his arrogant and perfectionist personality. He was conversing with some influential guests and cast a look of disdain at Clara as she approached. Wait a minute, he said, his tone barely disguising his contempt. Are you the one working here as what? A cleaning lady? Clara nodded, maintaining her composure. Enrique examined her as if inspecting a defective product. And who had the brilliant idea of letting you wander around the party? Don't you realize you're completely out of place here? He then turned to the guests. You know, we're trying to build a sophisticated image, but sometimes these distractions appear. The guests chuckled politely, silently agreeing. Clara opened her mouth to say something, but Enrique continued. I don't know how you got this job, but honestly, I hope tonight is your last shift here. Patricia, who was approaching the group, overheard the conversation and decided to add her venom. Enrique, she's already caused a scene tonight. She messed up the decorations and nearly ruined everything. Of course she did, he replied. Did you see how she walks? It's like an elephant in a china shop. Clara felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She wasn't just invisible anymore. She was the target of public mockery. For a moment, she thought about simply leaving without saying anything, but something inside her began to shift. She straightened up, took a deep breath, and, for the first time that night, raised her gaze. While Enrique and Patricia continued laughing and chatting, Clara walked toward the center of the hall. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, some curious, others openly judgmental. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the room, even muffling the background music. Patricia noticed and tried to intervene. Where do you think you're going? Go back to where you came from, or I'll... Clara interrupted her with a surprisingly calm tone. You've done enough, Patricia. The organizer froze, surprised by Clara's firm and direct tone. Whispers began to spread throughout the room. What is she doing? Someone asked. Probably making another scene, replied another, laughing. Clara stopped in the middle of the hall, looking at the stage where the directors had made their speeches earlier. She picked up the microphone from the table and held it firmly. Good evening, everyone, she said, her voice clear and steady. The room fell silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Clara, who stood holding the microphone, her posture upright and her expression serene. But her eyes carried something no one expected: determination. She began speaking slowly, her tone calm, though each word carried a weight that seemed to make the air around her vibrate. I arrived here 2 days ago, full of expectations. Not because I expected to be treated with honors, but because I believed that in a place like this, fashion wasn't just about clothes, but about attitude. I thought it was a space where people inspired one another, where there was respect and, above all, dignity. She paused. Some guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Others, like Patricia and Enrique, rolled their eyes as if they weren't taking her seriously. But in just 2 days, you've shown me something very different. You've shown me that for some, elegance is only skin deep, that the shine of clothing is more important than character. Clara looked directly at Patricia and Enrique, her voice growing firmer. I've seen managers and organizers who, instead of leading with integrity, use their positions to humiliate. I've seen employees laughing at those they believe to be beneath them. And I've seen a culture deeply rooted in prejudice and a lack of empathy. Patricia crossed her arms, trying to appear indifferent, but the redness in her face revealed that Clara's words were hitting the mark. And the guests? Clara continued, now turning her gaze to the models, investors, and other attendees. You are the audience for this brand. You should be the embodiment of everything this company represents. But many of you joined in the laughter and the disdain, as if it's natural to treat someone like garbage just because they don't wear the right clothes or have the body you consider ideal. A low murmur began to echo through the room, but Clara raised her hand. Silence, please. You've spoken enough today. Clara took a deep breath, her voice growing even stronger. Now, I want all of you to know exactly who you're dealing with. My name is Clara Almeida, and I am the new owner of Vita Bella. The shock was immediate. A collective gasp filled the room, as if a cold wind had swept through it. Patricia nearly dropped the glass she was holding. Enrique took a step back, his mouth agape, while the guests looked at Clara in disbelief. That's right, Clara continued, her tone unwavering. I bought this company a few weeks ago, and when I decided to start my work here, I chose a humble position to see with my own eyes how people are treated. She let out a dry laugh, full of irony. And guess what? You failed miserably. She turned to face Patricia and Enrique. Patricia, Enrique, you two are the embodiment of what's wrong with this company. You've abused your positions to humiliate and shame someone you believed to be just a cleaning lady. You should lead by example, but you've proven you lack morals, ethics, and competence. Consider yourselves fired. The impact was like a bomb. Patricia tried to protest. But, Ms. Clara, please, it's not what it seems. Clara raised her hand again, cutting off any attempt at an excuse. Enough. There's no excuse for humiliating another human being. She turned to the other employees. And for the rest of you who laughed, mocked, and watched without doing anything, you're out too. I'd rather start from scratch, hiring new staff who share the values I stand for, than keep people who contribute to this toxic culture. The murmurs grew louder. Many faces turned pale, others flushed with shame. Clara turned to the guests and models, who were visibly uncomfortable. And as for you, who represent the elite of fashion, let me be very clear. Under my leadership, Vita Bella will be a brand that rejects prejudice and discrimination of any kind. We will not tolerate racism, fat phobia, or any other form of disrespect toward a human being. If this is a problem for you, feel free not to return. She paused, allowing her words to resonate throughout the hall. True elegance isn't in what we wear, but in how we treat those around us. This is the new value of Vita Bella. If you can't embrace it, there's no place for you here. Clara stepped off the stage with the microphone still in her hand, her steps firm, leaving behind a room filled with awkward silence. No one seemed to know how to react to the sequence of events. Guests avoided making eye contact with one another. Employees stood frozen like statues, and those who had been fired began to leave with expressions that wavered between shock and shame. Patricia tried once more to approach Clara as she walked toward the exit. Miss Clara, please listen. I didn't know. She stammered, her voice breaking and her expression desperate. Clara paused for a moment and stared at her directly. "You didn't know?" Clara said, her tone calm yet cutting. "You didn't know that humiliating someone was wrong? You didn't know that treating another person with dignity is the bare minimum expected of a human being?" Patricia shook her head, unable to form a coherent response. Clara took a step closer, her gaze penetrating. "Your professional incompetence I could overlook with training. But your character? That's the real problem." Patricia stood there, paralyzed, as Clara resumed her walk. Enrique, on the other hand, didn't even try to justify himself. He quickly left the room, avoiding everyone's gaze, but not before muttering something like ridiculous as he exited through the door. Clara heard it, but didn't respond. By that point, he no longer mattered. As Clara made her way toward the exit, the atmosphere in the hall began to shift. Some guests whispered among themselves, now trying to justify everyone's behavior. "I didn't know she was the owner," said one model, visibly nervous. "That's not the point," responded an investor, his face serious. "The point is that no one should be treated that way, regardless of who they are." A guest who had earlier chuckled at the jokes about Clara now seemed visibly uncomfortable. She whispered to a friend, "I never thought something like this could happen, but I think she's right." Others remained silent, clearly ashamed of having been complicit, even if only through their inaction. Before stepping through the large glass doors leading to the parking lot, Clara stopped. The silence behind her was almost deafening. She turned slowly and, in a gesture no one expected, spoke into the microphone again. "Before I go," she began, her tone serene yet contrasting with the emotional chaos surrounding her, "I want to make one thing clear to everyone." The entire hall focused on her. "The change I'm proposing here isn't just about this company. It's not just about those who were fired today or the guests who felt comfortable mocking someone else. This is a change in mindset." She turned her gaze to the few employees who remained, those who had not participated in Clara's humiliation but had also not defended her. "And for those of you who stayed silent, know this: silence is sometimes just as harmful as direct harm. I hope you take this as a lesson. It's not enough to simply avoid doing wrong. You must stand against it." She cast one final look around, her words resonating like an echo in the hall. "Thank you for showing me what needs to change. And believe me, I will change it." Clara returned the microphone with a calmness that belied the storm she had just unleashed and walked out, leaving behind a room full of introspective faces and heavy hearts. The next morning, Vita Bella's office was silent. An extraordinary meeting had been called by Clara, now free of any disguise. She was impeccably dressed in an elegant gown, but her posture was even more commanding than her attire. "Today, we start from scratch," she said, addressing the few remaining employees. "And to do that, we need new leadership, fresh ideas, and above all, people who represent the values this brand will now stand for." Over the following weeks, Clara delivered on everything she had promised. She fired additional staff members with histories of toxic behavior, brought in new leaders, many from diverse backgrounds, and completely restructured the company's environment. Months later, Clara was invited to a major event in the fashion industry. There, a young designer approached her with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," the designer said. "You have no idea how much your changes have impacted so many lives." Clara smiled, but didn't respond immediately. She looked toward the horizon, reflecting on everything that had happened since that fateful night. "Sometimes we have to face the worst to create the best," she finally said. "And as long as I can fight for that, I will make it worth it."